Good morning, honourable members, support officials. Thank you very much for joining us today at this meeting of the Standing Committee on Agriculture, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning. Today is Tuesday, the 30th of November 2021. It's 9 o'clock, and this will probably be our last full meeting for the year, in the sense that we have quite a number of items on the agenda. We are going to meet at least 3 times during the course of this year and the last term of this year, but those are all dedicated. I almost want to call them special meetings, with only 1 item each on the agenda. Honourable members, I've received 1 apology, and that was from Honourable Brett Heron, who indicated that he would only be able to join this meeting somewhat later. Can I ask the members that are present to just introduce themselves briefly? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Good morning. Matlodi Masoko, member of the Standing Committee. Also, Member Marandi, an apology on the WhatsApp group, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for highlighting that as well. Over to you, Honourable Bartman.
Deirdre Bartman, member of the committee. Good morning.
Morning, and thank you very much, honourable members, for joining us. We are quorate, and we are going to therefore proceed with this meeting. Honourable members, the first item on the agenda is the consideration and adoption of the draft final mandate stage report on the National Environmental Management Laws Amendment Bill B14F of 2017. As you can see, this piece of legislation is becoming a long way, and there have been many iterations of that as well. Now, we are in a somewhat disadvantaged position in that the NCOP is expecting our final mandate report on this by next week, the 7th of December. Yet that final bill has not been finalized by the printers and has not been forwarded to us. What we do have, however, is obviously the minutes of the Standing Committee's meetings, in which they deliberated not only our input into this bill, but also that of the other 8 provinces. The bad news is that, unfortunately, all our proposed amendments have been turned down, or not been adopted by the NCOP. Yet very many other provinces' amendments have been dealt with. So what we're asking of you, honourable members, this morning is for us to please go through those proposed amendments, but since we don't have the final printed version, the proofread version in front of us, let us today spend the time to consider those amendments, to see whether we still agree and support, therefore, the National Environmental Management Laws Amendment Bill, so that at a later stage we can hopefully meet quite briefly and just officially adopt our report on this amendment bill. Now, the proposal is that we meet this coming Friday morning briefly at 8 o'clock. Programming has just decided to meet then at 8:30. And then at 9 o'clock, there will be further meetings. I think, Honourable Bartman, it might be a meeting of the Standing Committee that you are chairing. So, honourable members, because of the full program for Parliament going forward, this is what we want to propose. And Ms. Annick Rousseau from the department is ready to take us through the amendments as proposed by the other provinces. Ms. Nikak, do you believe that I've covered the situation? We have unfortunately got no indication of when we would be receiving that promised report. All I can say is that the NCOP is overdue on sending that through to us, and is really expecting almost the impossible from provinces. But we are, from the Western Cape side, set to absolutely bend over backwards and do our best, and not been guilty of delaying this long-coming amendment bill any further. Ms. Niekerk, over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I think you covered everything adequately. Thank you. I
recognize the hand of Honourable Maseko.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to find out, you say the amendments that we sent from Western Cape were not considered. It's only the 8 provinces that were considered in the NCOP.
I believe they must have been considered because we were in time and we submitted them, but they were not supported by the Standing Committee.
Okay, so if that is the case, is it possible for the department to just tell us how is that going to affect whatever the amendments that are there from the other provinces? Because what we proposed that were not considered, I think we were with the department to see if they agreed with us or not. Now, if there's the other provinces ones, if they can just sort of tell us the story of how will that affect the running in the department, rather than us going through one by one, just to have an indication from them if that will be negatively affecting, it will have a negative impact or not. I wonder if you get what I mean.
Correct. Honourable Maseko, that is what Ms. Annick Rousseau is standing by to do. They are ready now to give us, I think, if I understood you correctly, the department's view on the proposed amendments by the NCOP, and whether the department believes that, in the light of those amendments, which obviously have come as new and as news to us, whether that will affect our previously expressed support for this bill with the proposed amendments that we wanted to see being incorporated. Good. So if it's fine with you, honourable members, I'm then going to hand over to Ms. Rousseau to take us through the department's views on this. And Ms. Rousseau, I believe you've got a document that you would be able to beam, because I don't think that document has been circulated yet.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. This is Ayub Mohammed. I'm also joining Annick Rousseau in this meeting. So I'll be projecting, and we will be taking you through the document that we received last week, which is the amendments which the NCOP had adopted. There are some other changes that will happen to the bill once we see the final version, just to answer Member Maseko's question. And once we get that e-version, we would be in a better position to give an overall opinion on the changes that have been made. So we will be just concentrating on the matters that served at the NCOP and that the NCOP had requested amendments on. And once that e-version or an e-version becomes available, we would then be able to give you a better overview. And then the committee at that stage will be able to decide whether they support the amendments or not, because we did make quite substantial amendments in the past, which was submitted by the Standing Committee, and that was then not supported. In the amendments that have been made by other provinces and by DFFE, they have taken some of the comments which the Western Cape had submitted. So there is a sort of a to and a fro in terms of what is the final version and what will that look like. So we're waiting for that last version to be able to tell you that, and like you said, we're not sure when it will become available. The Standing Committee would then obviously be able to indicate whether they're supporting the bill or not, based on the comments from the department as we go forward. But what we're going to do now is just present what changes have been made and how the department view those changes, whether it's supported or not. So I'll hand over to Annick. I will be projecting because Annick will be talking. If there's any questions, we will be able to field that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed. Before Ms. Rousseau jumps in, can I just ask Honourable Bartman? I recognize your hand.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to understand quickly. In Programming Committee this morning, it was indicated that Number 1 of today's meeting wasn't on the program anymore, and number 1 deals with the consideration and adoption of the draft final mandate stage report on this bill, and number 2 then deals with normal committee reports and then quarterly reports and program, etc., etc. But it's also indicated now that the actual official version that we need to express our opinion on is not finalized, and Mr. Mohammed has also indicated that their specific comments on the information can't necessarily be shared with us because they haven't seen the official version yet. So if my understanding is correct, we're going to now consider items that aren't official, and there's a possibility that the department's going to come back and say, I'm sorry, we changed our mind. Can you please reconsider our comments and the official version? So I just want some legal clarity whether we are able to even go through this one by one, when in fact on Friday we are supposed to go through this one by one. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Bartman. Can I just say, obviously, being official, we are working from the official minutes of the NCOP Standing Committee. What we do not have in front of us, unfortunately, is the final printed, proofread F version of the bill, incorporating all those official decisions by the Standing Committee in the NCOP. So in order for us to be able to spend the necessary time and give it the necessary attention, the proposal is that Mr. Rousseau will take us through those amendments as proposed by the NCOP, so that once we've got the bill in front of us, then obviously we can officially take a decision on it. But the fear is that from now onwards, due to the full program of the Provincial Parliament, that there wouldn't be a long enough time slot for us to be able to consider each and every amendment as proposed by the, or adopted by the Standing Committee in the NCOP. Perhaps if you've got further questions, perhaps you can just raise that now.
Yes, Chair. If we're going on the minutes of the NCOP, are you then confirming that the NCOP in fact has not yet referred this bill back to us as a province? Because my understanding is that when a bill is referred back to the province from the NCOP, they send the new bill version, it gets sent to the speaker, it gets sent back to the chair of the committee, or sometimes it gets sent straight to the committee, and then we deal with that version of the bill. But the minutes of the NCOP are internal procedural minutes of their parliament, and it's not, to my knowledge, applicable to our parliament.
Correct, but the decisions taken by the Standing Committee will be reflected then in this bill. Obviously, it's a technical process now for the officials to be able to incorporate that into the bill itself. But the decisions stand. And I don't expect any new decisions, because the NCOP has now sent this off to, can I call it, the printers to send that through. But you are quite correct. That printed version has not yet been received by us. And unfortunately, despite numerous inquiries as to when that would be forwarded to us, they've not been able to give us any fixed promise, probably because, you know, the printing, the language practitioners' work, etc., is somewhat out of the hand of that Standing Committee. So the problem is that that bill could arrive at any moment, and they could still insist of us to have our final negotiating mandate back with them at the 7th of December, because that date, unfortunately, they've not yet changed. And that is where we are now running out of time. between now and next week, the 7th of December, I think we can all anticipate that they will probably have to kind of throw in the towel and say, okay, sorry, we've not been fair to the provinces. Too many provinces have not been able to come back to us within the limited time. This is now going to stand over for next year. But I would like for us from the Western Province not to be one of the provinces and actually prove to them that, you know, we will bend over backwards and we will ensure, if technically possible, that we can and will meet their deadlines, how tight they are or not. Unfortunately, in that respect, I think we are a little bit of an outlier for them, but I don't mind that, showing them that the Western Cape has got a well-functioning organisation and that we take mandates and due dates quite seriously. Honourable Maseko, and then again Honourable Bartman.
Thank you very much, Chair. I don't know, it's the first time really we go through the minutes of NCOP, but is it possible to allow Advocate Leroux to come in, because I saw he has raised a hand so that we can hear from him?
Thank you. As proposed, Advocate Leroux.
Chairperson, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I just a quick observation. I understand, and you know, maybe my understanding is not perfect, but there's not an E version of the bill yet, but I know there's an E list. So from where I'm sitting, the committee should be able to, or should have a full understanding of what changes or what amendments is proposed to the bill. Yes, that is my understanding. So I'm not really sure that the absence of an E version of the bill should present much of a stumbling block. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Mr. Mohammed, I think you raised some concerns that there might still be further changes, which differs from the picture that I have. Perhaps if you would just like to allude on in that regard.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Advocate Leroux that we can continue, and just to if I can guide the committee as well. These are the changes that the NCOP had written to the National Assembly. So the National Assembly would now have to, my understanding is that this will now be incorporated into that version, which would then be the E version that we would receive, if we recall. So these comments would then have been, would have to be incorporated into the amendments of the bill, if so deemed fit. And that is what we would then be going through. We assuming now that then I'm assuming, and the department is assuming, that these changes will be incorporated, because as is, but in the absence of seeing those amendments and any other amendments that the National Assembly or the department, the National Department has brought about, that is what I'm saying, that we are not able to comment on that. And that's why our task, and we asked this question to Ms. Niekerk when we chatted about this, what should we be doing in this session, and it would then just be to give an overview of what the NCOP has adopted and whether the department has agreed with it or not. Now, should we get a later version of the bill, it will obviously make our life a bit faster or easier or quicker, because then these amendments would have already have been considered within this session, if you could look at it that way. But all that I'm saying is I'm putting out there, like Mr. Chair said, that you're going to have another session when that version becomes available. So we are still prepared to go through with this, and we can only work on assumptions at the moment. That's my understanding, is that these comments or these amendments would have then been brought through. It was adopted. The Office of the State Law Advisor was in that session at the NCOP, as well as the Department of Environmental Affairs, Forestry Officers and Environmental Affairs were also in that meeting, and nobody else had objected to that, and it was also adopted at that meeting. So my assumption is, I'm saying, is that these changes would have been brought through into a later version, and we would then be able to also pick up if there was any other changes if we have to go through it. But currently we can only look at the amendments that has been proposed by the NCOP. That is all that I'm saying at the moment. And if it has all gone through, if we do meet again, then we could just be able to reflect that these changes have been. We've already discussed the certain of the changes today. That is how we understand the process. Thank you.
Ms. Niekerk?
Thank you, Chairperson. I just want to say for the record that the proposed list of amendments that was sent through from the MCOP has now been certified, and there is an official e-bill which was only received yesterday, but it was circulated to all members and the department. So those amendments have been certified and the official bill has been printed. The only outstanding matter is that the certified amendments, the official e-bill, those amendments have not been incorporated into the version yet. But the amendments have been certified. There's nothing that's going to be added to them. They are correct as is. So it's just that they need to be inserted into the F-bill, and that is the version that is not before the committee, and that is the version on which the committee has to base its final mandate. But the official e-bill is available and has been certified. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you so much. And obviously we cannot adopt a report on a version that is not yet in front of us. And that is why, unfortunately, we will have to officially consider the next version of this bill once received, but there will be no surprises, if I can use that word. Thank you, Ms. Niekerk. Is that a legacy hand? Then over to you, Honourable Bartman.
Chair, so I just want some clarity. I want to just then find out, okay, so the e-bill has been certified. That is the one with the actual amendments to the bill in it, which will be incorporated into the F-bill, which is not ready yet. And the F-bill is the one that we put our final mandate views upon. However, then the e-bill, which is certified, is then going to be presented to us today for information. And then the F-bill, once it is certified and referred to the Provincial Parliament, we will then express our final mandate on that bill. Is that my understanding?
Mine too. Perhaps Ms. Niekerk can just confirm.
Yes, Chairperson, that is 100% correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that excellent summary then, Honourable Bartman. Are you ready then, Honourable Members, for us to proceed and to listen to the presentation as done by the departmental officials? I take silence then as concurrence. Good, thank you very much. Mr. Mohammed, please beam that onto our screens, please.
Good morning, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members. It's Annick Rousseau speaking, and as discussed, I will be taking you through the e-list that we received from Ms. Niekerk last week. Ms. Niekerk, I assume it's exactly the same as the official e-version circulated late yesterday as well. So we're going to take you through that version. Okay, so starting off with proposed amendments to clause 1, which obviously deals, perhaps just before I start, I just want to maybe make one or two quick comments. I think we're all in agreement that this is quite a complex bill. It contains amendments to a number of different statutes, NEMA, biodiversity, waste, air quality. So what we're aiming to do is obviously give an indication of potential impacts in terms of the amendments included in this e-version, but just perhaps to note that once these provisions do get implemented, there might be unintended consequences. So maybe just to note that before we start. Okay, so first off, clause 1. So clause 1 deals with proposed changes to definitions included in NEMA, which is the National Environmental Management Act. First, it starts with 2 proposed changes to the definition of audit, as was included in the original version of the bill. So first, there's a proposed insertion of the words when used in section 24P and 24P capital A in the beginning of the definition. And just to remind the committee that section 24P and 24PA of NEMA deals with financial provisioning. So what this proposed amendment essentially does is it just limits the use of the definition of audit only in terms of section 24P and PA, which is for purposes of financial provisioning. So it clarifies the context of the definition. The second proposed change to the definition of audit proposes deleting undertaking progressive rehabilitation, decommissioning, closure and post-closure activities for listed and specified activities, including the pumping and treatment of extraneous and polluted water where relevant, and it then substitutes it with the wording financial provision as prescribed. Now, the impact of this proposed change to the definition of audit is in fact a consequential amendment to allow the broader application of financial provisioning, which is in fact in line with comments provided by the Western Cape government. So in our original negotiating mandate, we submitted that financial provisioning should be allowed to have a wider potential application, and this proposed definition is also in line with that. Then moving on to the third proposed change to a definition, which is the definition of environmental management instrument. It was merely a change. There was an issue with the numbering in the first version of the bill, so there's no real impact except for correcting a numbering issue. There was 2 sub-Roman numeral 3 numbering in the previous version, so this is just correcting an error. So no real impact except for correctness, I suppose. Then the fourth amendment to the definition clauses deals with the definition of financial provision, which is obviously quite key and quite it has quite a lot of impact. The changes to the definition. Perhaps first of all to note, I'm not going to read the whole definition, but first to note that the changes to this definition again promotes a wider application of the concept of requiring financial provision. And this is in line with the comment that the Western Cape government submitted on the first version of the bill. So again, the impact is to enable the broader application of the requirement for applicants and holders to provide financial provisioning. And how this proposed amendment to the definition of financial provisioning trying to accommodate that is to delete the reference to listed and specified activities, which was included in the previous version of the definition, and to rather refer to holder of an old order right or an applicant, which allows for a broader application. So again, in line with the Western Cape government submission to allow for a broader application of the concept of financial provisioning. The fifth proposed change to the definition clauses deals with the insertion of a definition for Indigenous knowledge practitioner. Now, the reason that there's a definition required, if one looks at the proposed clause 2, it refers to an Indigenous knowledge practitioner, hence the inclusion of a definition of what would constitute an Indigenous knowledge practitioner is a consequential amendment to the insertion of clause 2. And again, it latches on to an existing definition which provides legal certainty, which we support. And then moving on to the sixth change to a definition, and that deals with the definition of latent environmental impacts. Again, similar to what was done with the definition of audit, it limits the application of the definition of latent environmental impact to specifically the use of sections 24P and 24PA, which, as I said, deals with financial provisioning. So that's also a consequential amendment, which we support. Perhaps just to note here that in terms of potential unintended consequences, there was an inclusion of the text and defined in this latest version of latent environmental impacts. So perhaps one must just keep in mind that it's not clear exactly what the potential unintended consequences are of including this and defined in the definition, which might lead to an implementation challenge. Then the seventh change to the definitions clause deals with the insertion of a definition for mining activity. Now again, the insertion of mining activity must be read together with the amendments in clause 4, which we'll deal with just now. So the impact of this, and I think there'll be more clarity when we deal with clause 4, is to simplify and to clarify when the Minister of Mineral Resources will be the responsible competent authority for a particular listed activity. I think when we get to clause 4, it will be much clearer, but it's basically the impact of this insertion is clarity and to simplify wording, which we support. Then there's a change to the definition of mitigate as well as rehabilitate. Both these definitions, similar to the definition of audit and latent environmental impacts, is again limited to the application when used in section 24P and PA, which, as I said, deal with the financial provisioning provisions. And then the last proposed change to the definitions proposes the deletion of remediate or residual environmental impacts. And the rationale for this is that given the proposed changes to sections 24P and sections 24PA, there is no need anymore to actually include a definition for both these terms. Therefore, it makes sense from a necessity perspective. Okay, so that deals with the proposed changes to definitions as contained in clause 1, and that brings us to clause 2, which proposes the insertion of a new principle in NEMA. So this was included in the original bill, but the change proposes to expand on the application of this principle. Previously, there was only reference to Black professionals, but this has now been expanded to include previously disadvantaged professionals, and then it has a specific emphasis on Black professionals and Indigenous knowledge practitioners, and hence the insertion of a definition as I've noted previously. So therefore we're also in line, and this is also, if I might just add, in line with the comment that was submitted by the Western Cape government on the original bill. That then takes us to clause 3. Clause 3 is quite long. I'm not going to read it in detail. It's very similar to the previous version that was included. And the fact that it's included in the E-list is to just correct numbering and some editorial errors. So there's no substantive change to what was proposed in the previous version bill. Then there's also another proposed amendment to clause 3, and that deals with the provision that B capital A. So first of all, it deletes that list of environmental management instruments, and the reason for deleting the list is as I dealt in the section or the definition section, that there is now a definition included for this list, so therefore it's not needed to actually list all the potential environmental management instruments in this provision, which in fact deals with giving the minister power to draft regulations. So the list of instruments is more appropriate in the definition where it has been included. So this is kind of a consequential amendment, one would say. That then brings us to clause 4, which deals with section 24 of NEMA. So I noted there was an insertion or an inclusion of a definition for mining activity, and that definition relates to this amendment in clause 4, where previously the Minister of Mineral Resources was identified where an activity was directly related to prospecting or exploration of a mineral or petroleum resource, or extraction and primary processing of a mineral or petroleum resource. All that complicated, long-winded wording has now been replaced with a mining activity and a definition is provided in the definition section for what would constitute a mining activity. And the impact is I think it increases clarity in terms of when the Minister of Mineral Resources would be the competent authority for a so-called mining activity. And it also simplifies and increases, and I think improves on the readability of the Act. That then brings us to another amendment to Clause 4, which also deals with Section 24C of NEMA. And this proposed amendment further expands the potential of competent authorities reaching an agreement for another competent authority to be the competent authority in a particular matter to also include the minister responsible for mineral resources. In the past, only the MEC or the minister could reach such an agreement, but now also includes the Minister of Mineral Resources, which gives further clarity in terms of the Minister of Mineral Resources responsibility, which we support. Then the third proposed amendment to Clause 4 is another consequential amendment when one looks at the proposed insertion of mining activity and the subsequent amendment to Clause 4, which we've dealt with now. Instead of having the wording, the old wording of when the Minister of Mineral Resources is the competent authority, it now only refers to mining activity, which is clearly defined, which again, I believe improves the readability and simplifies and creates clarity in terms of the Minister of Mineral Resources responsibility. That then brings us to Clause 5. Now, Clause 5 deals with Section 24G of NEMA, which allows for the rectification of unlawful activities. It's quite a long provision. I'm not going to read the entire provision, but just perhaps to note that it's mostly, the changes mostly relates to addressing incorrect numbering and providing clarity and ease of readability. So there's no substantive change from the previous version, but it's more to address numbering issues. Okay, and that then brings us to Clause 7, which deals with Section 24O of NEMA, and that regulates the consultation between relevant authorities. So when there is a competent authority needing to make a decision on environmental authorization, there's a requirement for them to consult with other relevant state departments. So this is in fact in line with a comment that was made by the Western Cape government, where we submitted that instead of referring to state department, the term should rather refer to organ of state, given that organ of state has a wider application and consultation must include consultation with municipalities, and organ of state specifically includes a municipality. So again, this is in line with the Western Cape government comment that was submitted, and it confirms and widens the application and scope of the requirement for consultation, which we support. The remaining amendments to Clause 7, there's 3 remaining amendments, and those are all consequential amendments. Okay, then we get to Clause 8, which deals with Section 24P of NEMA, which deals with the provisions on financial provision for remediation of environmental damage. So first, just perhaps to note that when we spoke about the definition of financial provisioning in the beginning, I specifically noted that the definition of financial provisioning, the changes to that definition was made in line with a comment made by the Western Cape government to try and ensure that the potential scope of when financial provisioning is required is broader and not only limited to listed or specified activities. And the proposed amendment to Clause 8, i.e. Section 24P, is also in line with this set of amendments aimed at widening the scope of the potential application for financial provisioning. So in this particular amendment, this is the specific reference to determined and provided for listed or specified activities is deleted. So it's again not limited to only specified or listed activities, but it allows for broader potential scope. Okay, and then the second amendment to clause 8, which still deals with financial provisioning, only confirms that it's mandatory. This was also in line with the Western Cape Government comment, where we requested that is required should be replaced with must. So therefore, it just confirms that it is in fact mandatory to provide a financial provisioning where it is prescribed. Then we move on to clause 9, which deals with section 24P capital A of NEMA, and that is again financial provisioning, but specific to mining. And first, there's a consequential amendment where again we've dealt with the new definition of mining activity. So where mining activity, where in previous versions there was a much longer reference included here, where it can now just be replaced with mining activity, which is then defined in the definitions section. The other main change to this, the first part of clause 9, is also where in the first version of the bill, specific time periods were prescribed, were provided in the actual provision. This has been replaced with the words as prescribed, so the timeframes are not included here in the enabling provision, but they will be prescribed in the accompanying regulations. So the regulations will in fact now detail the time periods for when certain activities need to be done with regard to the provision of financial provisioning. And then the second part of the amendment to clause 9 is also a consequential amendment, again in line with the move towards making the potential application of financial provisioning broader than it currently is, which we do support, and again is in line with the comment made by the Western Cape Government on the initial version of the bill. That then brings us to clause 10. And again, a consequential amendment to the newly inserted definition of mining activity and clause 4, and here the reference to mining activity is inserted in the first line there. The second part of the amendment to clause 10 is also just a consequential amendment, again bringing in the term mining activity. And then the definition to clause 17 is also a consequential amendment to correct the reference to environmental, mineral and petroleum inspector. That then brings us to clause 20. Clause 20 deals with section 31G, capital G of NEMA, which is deals or regulates the functions of the environmental management inspectors. So the next couple of amendments brings us into the realm of compliance monitoring and enforcement. And perhaps just to note that we made quite a couple of provisions. This was in line with the Western Cape Government comment, where we proposed the insertion of the reference to mineral and petroleum resource inspector. And you will note there's quite a couple of instances where, in line with the Western Cape Government's comment, the specific term has now been included. The impact is to clarify the responsibility of the environmental, mineral and petroleum inspector, which we of course support, and also to clarify the minister responsible for mineral resources as well as the minister responsible for water affairs. So there's quite a couple of instances. I'm not going to go into all of them for the sake of time, but just perhaps to note that this again was in line with the Western Cape Government comment, where we submitted that in sections 31 capital H of NEMA, 31I, 31J, 31K and 31L should all be amended to include a specific reference to environmental petroleum inspectors. And this again creates clarity and legal certainty, which we of course support. clause 31, clause 23, again, clause 31J of NEMA, which is clause 23, deals with powers to stop, enter and search vehicles. Again, it deals with the environmental management inspectors, and again, in line with the Western Cape government suggestion, their specific reference to environmental, mineral and petroleum inspector was inserted, and I've dealt with the impacts and providing the legal certainty we support. That then brings us to clause 24. And again, it deals with section 31K of NEMA, routine inspections, and again, bringing in the specific reference to environmental, mineral and petroleum inspector, allowing and confirming their power to also conduct routine inspections. That then brings us to clause 25, which it deals with section 31L of NEMA. And again, in line with the Western Cape government comment, it includes the reference to Minister responsible for mineral resources and Minister responsible for water resources, as well as Municipal Council, which is also in line with the Western Cape government comment submitted on the original version of the bill. Again, all these amendments clarifies responsibilities of all the various organs of state and ministers, and which we support and was in line with our original comments. That then brings us to section 31N of NEMA. This also is in line with the Western Cape government comments submitted, where we required or we submitted that reference must be included to environmental, mineral, petroleum inspector, as well as the minister responsible for mineral resources, minister responsible for water resources, and municipal council. Then the new clause, clause 27, section 31O of NEMA. And this again is in line with the comments submitted by the Western Cape government, and it clarifies responsibilities. Then clause 50, capital A of NEMA. So clause 50, it's a new clause 38, and it deals with section 50, capital A of NEMA. Section 50, capital A of NEMA deals with any future amendments to the One Environmental System and the proposed insertion of prospecting, exploration or production is a consequential amendment and therefore supported. So, Chair, this brings us to the end of the changes to NEMA, to the National Environmental Management Act. The following couple of amendments are related to the National Environmental Management Biodiversity Act. And perhaps just to note that most of these amendments are consequential to the changes that were made to the definition of well-being. So in clause 41, there was a definition of well-being included in the original version of the bill. The definition was subsequently expanded. So originally, it only referred to the living conditions of a faunal biological resource, and to ensure that they are conducive to its health. So this amended version expands, and it now also specifically includes physiological, mental health, as well as quality of life and the ability to cope with its environment. So it was expanded quite a bit from the previous version, and the other main change to this definition is where in the previous definition there was reference to a faunal biological resource. This reference has now been replaced with an animal. And the aim of the amendment is to enable the national minister to address some legislative gaps that there might be in terms of the transport and captive wild animals being held in captivity. So I think the subsequent amendments to clause 44 and 48 are all consequential to actually give effect to this change to the definition of well-being, which are supported. You will note that clause 48 deletes the reference to a faunal biological resource and rather substitutes it with an animal, which is in line with the definition of well-being, the changes made to that definition as I've just dealt with. Though that's both clause 44 as well as clause 48. Then clause 49. Clause 49 deals with section 99 of NEMBA, which is which deals with consultation requirements. Now, perhaps to note, this is quite an interesting one. So that the Western Cape government submitted a comment to the effect that the current form or the previous form of this clause required that an MEC for Environmental Affairs must, amongst others, consult all cabinet members whose area of responsibility may be affected by the exercise of a power in terms of the Principal Act. We submitted that an MEC would be exercising that power only on a provincial level, so question why all cabinet members must also be consulted, and submitted that only the Provincial Executive Council should be consulted. The proposed change, however, still includes consultation requirement with all cabinet members, as well as members of the Provincial Executive Council and organs of state. So it appears that the consultation requirements are, in fact, even more onerous than the previous version, which the impact would, of course, be increased requirements for consultation of the provincial minister, i.e. being consultation on a national level. And then the last proposed change to the National Environmental Management Biodiversity Act, which is clause 53, is another consequential amendment that is required to give effect to the proposed change to the definition of well-being. And those are the changes in the E-list related to the Biodiversity Act. There's only one proposed change to the National Environmental Management Air Quality Act, that is clause 53, and that is in fact also in line with a comment that was submitted by the Western Cape government. This section in the Air Quality Act deals with a situation where a licensing authority for an air emission license application must be identified. So in an instance where usually it would be the municipality, but in an instance where a listed activity falls within the boundaries of more than one metropolitan municipality, more than one district municipality, or both a metropolitan and a district municipality, the question was who should then be the competent authority. It's not the relevant municipality, but it must be the province. So the previous version of the bill required that the province can only be the licensing authority if there's agreement between the municipalities. The Western Cape government's comment, however, raised the concern that practically it might not always be possible to obtain this agreement from the municipalities, and therefore suggested the deletion of the requirement for an agreement. And this was accepted, and now the provincial organ of state is the default licensing authority in those instances, which is obviously in line with the comment made by the Western Cape government. And that then brings us to clause 58, which is a proposed amendment to the National Environmental Management Waste Act. So we've dealt with the air quality. The main amendment or the main changes included for the Waste Act on the E-list is a proposed change to the definition of waste. So the definition of waste was amended with the aim of further simplifying and clarifying the definition of waste, which is already quite a lengthy definition. The proposed change to the definition of waste, however, required some consequential amendments, i.e. a insertion for the first definition of commercial value, because it's used in the definition of waste, as well as the inclusion of a definition for trade-in, as it's used in the new definition of waste. So all of these read together aims to clarify and simplify the definition of waste and provide legal certainty, which we support. Then clause 64, which still deals with the National Environmental Management Waste Act. It basically deals with, there's a requirement in the Waste Act that potential contaminated land must be notified, the National Department must be notified of a potential contaminated land. The requirement for this notification, however, specifically noted that this contamination must be significant. So this is in line with the proposed Western Cape Government comment, which indicated that the requirement of such contamination having to be significant should be deleted, and this was accepted, and the reference to significantly has subsequently been deleted. So any proposed contamination, whether it's significant or not, should be reported to the National Department, which is in line with the comment we made, which we obviously support. That then brings us to clause 68, which is a consequential amendment. And this, in fact, relates to the amendment or the insertion of mining activity in NEMA, which we dealt with right in the beginning of the session. So again, here this clause specifically refers to mining activity, which is then defined in NEMA as we dealt with earlier. And then there's another new clause in the Waste Act, which is the transitional provision. And this transitional provision is a new insertion, which is required for that newly inserted definition of waste. Because obviously, given that there's a new definition of waste, certain things would fall under the old definition, and then given the changes in the definition, certain materials or objects would now fall within the new definition of waste. So this provision was inserted as a consequential amendment to deal with this transitional period between the old definition and the new definition, and therefore provides legal certainty and clarity in terms of how to go from the old waste definition to the new one, which is supported. And Chair, I think that is the last clause on my e-list. Yes, I think that was the last clause. Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Rousseau. And thank you very much. I see you've been involved with this piece of legislation for quite a long time. I think your first comment to the National Assembly on this was 3.5 years ago. So thank you very much. It's obvious to me that we can learn a lot from you, having dealt with this piece of legislation for so much longer than what we have done. Honourable members, are there any questions from your side at this point in time? I did notice that there was
Chair.
No question. Thank you. Honourable Bartman.
None, thank you.
Thank you. I do notice that, we had a bit of a debate with the Western Cape Biodiversity Bill on the term search by some of the law enforcement officers, and I do see that the word search did appear in here. So let's just hope that it will muster legal scrutiny from the Constitutional Court, etc. Mr. Rousseau, am I correct then in summarizing, saying that with all the amendments that have been proposed or adopted by the NCOP, that you would be comfortable for the Western Cape Standing Committee to report that we can give a mandate to our representatives in the NCOP to support the amendments?
Mr. Chair, yes, we could, in terms of what we've seen here in front of us.
Good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Advocate LaRue, I've highlighted the issue of search. I don't know if you were with us when we did the biodiversity bill and where some concerns were expressed. But if we could just get your view, are you happy also for the Western Cape then to report that we mandate our representatives in the NCOP to support this bill?
Yes, as indicated in terms of what we've seen in front of us here now, as presented.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mohammed. And Advocate LaRue, you are still with us?
Chairperson, yes, I am. As you say, the bill has been in the circulation for quite some time. I did look at the issue of search when probably a year ago, and I was not concerned with those provisions. Chairperson, I'm not going to express specifically a view on whether I think the department indicated, as I understood it, a broad agreement with the E list. I know there were some issues. There were a lot of issues that were accepted by the National Department and the Select Committee that was identified by the provincial government. And I know there were a few issues that were not accepted. Specifically coming to mind was the issue of the licensing authority of municipalities, and a constitutional question was raised there by the Western Cape government, which, for the record, I completely agree with that constitutional concern that was raised. And I do know that the department and the Select Committee did not deal with that issue. And there may be others. So what I'm saying is I understand that the department agrees in broad strokes, it seems, with the amendments proposed in the E-list. I don't know whether there are other issues that were not incorporated in the E-list that should be of concern for the committee. Certainly for me, that issue on the licensing authority of municipalities when it comes to air pollution licensing. For me, that issue still appears to be unresolved, and it appears to be a legitimate constitutional question. Thank you, Chair.
Good. Thank you very much. Thank you. Ms. Niekerk, I presume that you would be the contact person for the NCOP officials, and that the moment you receive any further documentation from them, that you would then be circulating that as quickly as possible, so that you and others can go through it just to see whether what we've considered this morning has been incorporated and with no other changes in the next piece of legislation, and that you would alert us should there be other changes that might impact on what we've been told this morning.
I shall do so, Chairperson. Yes, definitely.
Thank you. Mr. Mohammed, I saw your microphone.
No, I just, thanks, yes, if we can get that, and that's exactly the point that, sorry, that I was making earlier on, the issues that Advocate Leroux had raised, because this is this version that we see, and we are assuming that there will be some additional amendments that have been tabled or that have been brought. Remember, these are only the amendments which the NCOP had raised. So we're assuming there might be some other amendments through some other processes as well. But as you've seen, a lot of the amendments that the National Department presented in this bill to the NCOP actually stems from our comments that we had given. So we're hoping to see if there is anything, or then we would be able to raise some of those concerns in terms of those matters like the appeals at the municipality because they're the licensing authority, etc. That has not yet been dealt with, and which is why we indicated we can support these versions. There's nothing that these edits or amendments, because there's nothing that that goes against what we had originally proposed. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So, honourable members, we've now scheduled a meeting for Friday morning at 8 o'clock in the expectation that within the next day or two, we would be receiving further documentation. And I think, Ms. Niekerk, we must adopt, that would be my proposal, that unless we've received that documentation by Thursday, let's say 11 o'clock, you know, if we don't receive that documentation, that Friday morning's meeting would be cancelled? Or do you require us to still then adopt the minutes of today's meeting, etc., this Friday morning? Just give us some indication, please.
Chairperson, no, then the meeting won't be required in terms of adopting committee documents. But I think you wanted to alert the members regarding the Western Cape Biodiversity Bill to maybe review the amendments that were adopted by the committee? I'm just refreshing your memory here.
Thank you very much. Yes. Honourable members, you will recall that last week we went clause by clause through the Western Cape Biodiversity Bill, and that the Western Cape Biodiversity Bill was then sent back for translation into also Afrikaans and isiXhosa. And we have received the Afrikaans version, and our procedural officer has assured me that all the language practitioners and everybody is happy that all the amendments that we proposed have been dealt with and that they've been incorporated and translated correctly, but that there's been a slight delay with the isiXhosa version, and we expect that to be finalized within the next day or two as well, and that would then be serving in front of us on Friday morning, in order for us just to note those translations, and that the aim is still for this bill then to serve before the provincial legislature next week, and I believe it would be Wednesday the 8th of December. It has been provisionally put onto the order paper, and we're confident that we would be able to then finalize that, and I trust that that would also be appreciated by the department, that we are really going out of our way to see whether we can amend and whether we can have the legislature decide on this before the end of year recess, and the honourable members, that will, I think, really be a great achievement for us, especially if we see how long other legislation can take to go through all the processes. I think this committee has really excelled in that regard. I really want to thank everybody, including all officials that supported us so ably in this process. Thank you very much, Mr. Mohammed. Thank you very much, Mr. Rousseau, for your hard work. Also, Advocate Leroux, we appreciate your input as well, and we now wait for the next communication from the NCOP, and trust that that would allow us to proceed as we envisage. And as I've said, I would not be surprised, honourable members, if the due date of the 7th of December for our final mandate be postponed. But I think we are as ready as we could have been at this stage. Thank you very much, honourable members. This now dealt with the first item on our agenda this morning. Are you happy for us to proceed to the second one, which is the consideration and adoption of a number of documents, starting off with the minutes of the 18th and the 19th of November? Thank you very much, Mr. Mohammed. Ms. Rousseau, Advocate Leroux, if you would like to excuse yourself, you're welcome to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you,
The items that remain on our agenda are mostly of administrative nature. Thank you, honourable members. Please consider page 1 of the minutes of Thursday, the 18th of November. Page 2. Page 3. Honourable members, can I please get a proposal that we adopt the minutes?
I propose that we adopt the minutes, Chair.
I recognise Honourable Bartman's hand.
I second.
Thank you. It's been proposed and seconded. Thank you very much. Adopted. Can we please have the minutes of Thank you, honourable members. Please see the minutes of the 19th, page 1, then page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5. Honourable members, it's been put to the committee. Can I get a proposal that we adopt?
Chair, I wasn't present for this meeting.
Chair, I propose that we adopt.
Thank you very much. In terms of our rules, we do not need a seconder, so thank you very much, Honourable Maseko. I will in any case support as well. Then the next item on our agenda is the report. And I wonder if Ms. Nikak would be so kind just to beam that onto the screen as well. The report on the annual report discussion of the Department of Agriculture and CASIDRA for the 2020-2021 financial year. So this is first Agriculture and CASIDRA.
Chairperson.
That report has been circulated.
Chairperson.
Ms. Nikak.
I just want to ask the committee's permission to please change the date at the top. I have it dated as 24 November. That is when we should have met last week. I'd just like to change that to today's date, please.
Good. And with that amendment, can I have a proposal that we adopt this report?
I propose that we adopt.
Support.
Thank you. Thank you, honourable members. Good. So that has been dealt with. The next one is the report on the planning and Cape Nature for the 2020-2021 financial year. Thank you. I see there the date has been changed. Am I correct, Ms. Nikak?
It hasn't been changed. I actually sent it out correctly. It was only the other one that I forgot to change, Chairperson.
Yeah, good. Thank you very much. So page 1 has been considered, page 2, page 3. Good, and particularly if we can have the resolutions just for a moment. (411), 412, 413. Thank you very much, Ms. Niekerk. It's been put to the committee, honourable members, for your consideration.
Move to adopt.
Thank you, honourable Bartman.
Support.
Thank you, unanimously adopted. Thank you. The next one on our agenda is the quarterly report for July to September. Thank you very much. Sorry, Ms. Niekerk, first page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Thank you. Going down, page 5, 6. Thank you, honourable members. This was also circulated. Sorry, I've temporarily been cut off. Is there a proposal for this to be adopted?
Move to adopt.
Thank you, Honourable Bartman.
Support.
Supported? Good, thank you very much. Thank you, honourable members. The next item on our agenda is then the tracking document as at today's date, the 30th of November 2021. You see there page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Can we put the whole document? It has also been circulated, honourable members.
Move to adopt.
Any proposals that we adopt? Yes, it's been
Support.
proposed by Honourable Bartman. Is there support? Good, thank you, Honourable Maseko. Honourable members, I'm getting a message that my connection is bad. So please, if I'm cut off, please just remain. I will rejoin as soon as possible. The next item on our agenda is now the program or the proposed program for the first quarter of 2022. And you see it there, just obviously this is a work in progress. Good. Again, you will see that there's an oversight visit planned in terms of a previous resolution by this committee that we go in and observe and have oversight regarding the support given to smallholder farmers who are participants in the support program. And I can just say that there is a notion that perhaps go to the Southern Cape. There's also the possibility of us visiting the biofuel pilot plant at Karatra, which you will see is also included in our tracking document. But this is obviously just still in the planning process. So is there support for this provisional planning? Honourable Maseko, your hand.
Yes, Chair. I just want to find out from the procedural officer. I see it's a 3 days visit. Are you going to join it with another committee? Because I tend to believe it will overlap one way or another, or it's just the days that you feel there won't be anything happening for those 3 days, that you don't have to do a joint oversight?
Thank you, Ms. Maseko. It's just a provisional date. Well, I haven't seen the program for next year yet, but in order for budgeting, we had to make provision in terms of the budget for this visit. So it's just provisional for now. I will liaise with obviously the chairperson and with Nareen. All right, thank you.
Okay, with that being said, I propose that we adopt, Chair.
Thank you. I recognize Honourable Bartman's hand.
Thank you, Chair. In the program committee, Nareen did send out the draft first quarter program as part of the documentation to those in programming. So there is a draft one available. I do know in January, off the top of my head, that the first few weeks are constituency after recess, and that last week is budget workshop. So I'm completely out for January, but I would advise checking for February, because to my knowledge, that is the same time when SONA and SOPAs are occurring. And there's, to my knowledge, a number of committees that have already booked time slots in that particular week already. Thanks.
Good, thank you, Honourable Bartman. And yes, our venue could also be affected once we know where the State of the Province address is going to be, because in terms of past practices. We have then given special attention to specific areas of the Western Cape. But this is the provincial program.
Yeah, I propose that we adopt.
Second.
Apologies. Thank you for that proposal, Honourable Maseko. Apologies, I've been temporarily kicked out of the meeting due to bad signal quality. And then, Honourable Members, the next one is under General. I don't know if there are any items, Ms. Nikak, that you would like to raise or bring under our attention, particularly going forward.
Yes, Chairperson, just for the next meetings now, obviously the 3rd of Friday this week will be dependent on whether we receive the F version of the NEMLA bill. But if it's not received, then am I correct in saying that the committee will still meet to look at the changes that were incorporated into the Western Cape Biodiversity Bill? That's for the 3rd, and then next week we have the adjusted budgets on the 7th of December, which would be the last meetings of this committee for the year. Thank you.
Good, thank you very much, Ms. Nikak. Yes, so honourable members, we will proceed, even if it's just to officially note the translated versions of the biodiversity bill before it goes through to the legislature for consideration there. So thank you very much. So that we'll be seeing each other then on Friday, 8 o'clock. And then, as Ms. Nikak has said, for I think it's a 1-hour meeting each on the appropriated budget next week and Tuesday afternoon. Good. Thank you, honourable members. Are there any resolutions or actions that you would like to propose for this committee to consider?
No, Chair.
Not from your side. I take silence also as nothing from Honourable Bartman's side. Honourable members, then I would like to say from my side a big thank you to all the members of this committee, also those who had to submit their apologies for today's meeting. It's really been great, and you've made my task an easy one. I'm quite proud of not only the frequency of our meetings, the hard work that we've put in, but also, if I may say so, the quality of the work, the spirit of cooperation and support that we've seen. We've seen in this past year really wonderful things happening in the fields of agriculture, also the Department of Environmental Affairs with the legislation that we've considered. And looking back on this year, I am extremely happy. Now, we all know nothing of this would have been possible if it wasn't for the support that we've received from a number of our officials, our procedural officer, Ms. Nikak, also Ms. Mshompela. Thank you very much. And then, honourable members, I think this year was again one of those that were really, I almost want to say, determined by the fact that we could meet online for the full duration of this year, all 12 months. We've been able to continue with our work despite the pandemic, and I think that in itself is no small achievement either. So thank you very much. We will be seeing each other, so I don't believe it is time for us to already wish each other a festive season that will come. But from my side, I want to say thank you again. And I hope you will have a wonderful day going forward, seeing you again this coming Friday. Thank you, and this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, bye.
Thank you, bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye, members. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nomfundo and Clarence, for your assistance.
Pleasure, Shireen.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Clarence, bye.